Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jessica Zavala, and it is my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Ohio Program for Campus Safety and Mental Health to today's webinar, Student Veterans, Understanding the Culture, Promoting Wellness, Preventing Suicide. Before I introduce today's presenter, I do realize that Veterans Day was recognized this past week, but I also want to salute and recognize those of you who are joining us who have served and perhaps who are currently serving in a branch of the military. So I want to just say thank you so much for your service, and perhaps you can join me in thanking someone on your campus as well who has served or who is currently serving. I do have a few brief announcements to share. First and foremost, CME and CEU credits are available. The activity code for today's session is 65 CAPE. That's 65 CAPE. This code will expire on tomorrow, November 16th at 12 p.m. Please be on the lookout. Chris has already placed some information in the chat, but there will be information posted periodically on how to obtain credits. Next, we invite you to join us for our final webinar of 2023 on December 5th at 12 noon as Dr. Nikki Sharma from The Ohio State University joins us to share effective strategies for maximizing your performance professionally and personally by focusing on resiliency. Additional details regarding how you can register or regarding this webinar can be found on our website and social media channels. For today's webinar, we're going to encourage you to post your questions or comments in the chat. We're also hoping to have an interactive conversation, so I will remain on to help field some of those questions that you may have today for our presenter. Finally, this webinar will be recorded and the video will be made available for viewing on our YouTube channel. And now to introduce our presenter, David Edwards. Mr. Edwards completed 26 years in the United States Air Force. His last assignment was as a superintendent, plans and resource flight at Travis Air Force Base, California. In this position, he was responsible for the leadership, guidance, and welfare of military and civilian personnel. Mr. Edwards began his position in June 2023 as the Veterans Certification Assistant. Prior to that, he was the coordinator of Veterans Resources, academic advisor. Additionally, he served as the inaugural director. Since then, he has developed programs to educate faculty and staff on veteran students, who they are, and what they bring to the university campus. This is done through the Faculty Awareness Training Program, where his office has trained approximately 300 people across all Ohio University campuses. Not only is his focus on educating the Ohio University community about veterans, he also forges relationships with campus resources to develop programs to further educate the Ohio University community about veterans and their unique needs. He has worked with the Development Office to create a scholarship for veterans. Furthermore, he has also worked with the University Communications and Marketing Office to create a video of what makes Ohio University military friendly for recruitment purposes. In February 2017, the U.S. Department of Education listed Ohio University as an 8 Keys to Veteran Success School. Wow. There is so much more to read and to learn about this program and also Mr. Edwards, but I think it's most important to note Mr. Edwards' motto, which is to lead through service and love. So without further ado, I introduce Mr. David Edwards.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I really do appreciate the introduction. Remind me to pay you for that later. I really do appreciate it. It is my honor to be with you today to talk about a subject that has national attention and the attention of state and local agencies. It is not an easy topic to discuss, but one that is very important, especially us in higher education as well as the community services that deal in the healthcare arena. I'm going to come from this from an aspect of military individual because, as Jessica alluded, uh, 26 years in the Air Force. But I'm also coming from it from the aspect of what do we do on the university to serve our veteran students? How do we work with our campus and community resources to help them become acclimated and integrated into both of those communities? So without further ado, I am going to start the slides and we will begin our conversation because that's exactly what I want it to be. So as we go along, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat because I don't want you to wait until the end to ask the question, because if you're like me, if I wait to the end, I will forget what the question that I wanted to ask. So please ask your questions. So back about 5 years ago, as Jessica mentioned, we created a program at Ohio University that works with our faculty and staff and administrators on helping them understand who our veteran students are. And so we named it the landing zone. Those of you in the military understand what the term landing zone is. That's the drop off and pickup point for our military folks going into an area of operations. So we figured it was very appropriate to name our uh, program and our training based on already understood military vernacular. So what we do, as I already said, is we talk to our faculty, staff, and administrators about who our veteran students are, what they bring to the university and community um, areas, and to help them to understand that our veteran students may, and I use that word strongly, what our veteran students may be challenged with in the classroom. And so further on down, we're going to talk about some of the resources that are available to the campus community in order to better serve our veteran students. Now, this next slide, what I would like for you to do is to read the words on the left, then look at the picture of the individual on the right and drop one word in the chat, what first comes to your mind when you see the individual. Whoops, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Again, this is our agenda for today. A little bit more about me. I did serve in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, as well as Kuwait, and I got to see some of the things that we're actually going to be talking about. So I apologize for jumping ahead a slide. So this is the slide that I would like to for you to look at. Drop that one word in the chat, and I'll give you just a moment. Definitely misunderstood, broken, fearful, a father. Very, very true. Protective. Human. I like that one. I have not heard that one before. So thank you, Louise. Multifaceted. That's another one I haven't heard. Hurting. That's a common theme. Caring a lot is good. Cautious, sensitive, withdrawn. Absolutely. Single story. Interesting, Giselle. I have not heard that one before either. Withdrawn. So you see, when we look at an individual, we already form a perception about the individual. And it's not right or wrong, it's just that we do it. And so at the very bottom of that slide, it says exactly what we need to do. And that takes a lot of effort from our mental capacities, is that we can end the stigma. The stigma doesn't always mean a bad thing, it's just what we put on somebody, but it often does mean something that's not very good. So, having this in mind, especially as we move on to the slides that talk about PTSD, think about any stigmas that you may have in working with, especially if you're in the healthcare arena or a university arena, uh, dealing with any veteran patients or veteran students, if you have a stigma and what kind of stigma that is. But before we get into PTSD, I want to talk about what happens to us when we go on a deployment. Now, a deployment is typically longer than 30 days, um, often in places that are not comfortable. For me, when I went to Desert Shield, Desert Storm, we were in the desert in the middle of United Arab Emirates. And it was not very fun. For miles and miles around, it's nothing but sand. Um, we had no idea what to expect because Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait on August 8th. I was there in United Arab Emirates on August 10th. We had no clue what was going to happen. We didn't know when or if hostilities were going to start. And so we had to literally work with the host nation to establish our base on their base. So these are some of the things, and this is for those of you who have served or are serving, have deployed. When you look at this list, you're probably going, yeah, and there's probably a few more, and that's fine if there's a few more. But this just kind of gives you an idea of what military individuals go through. And these are mental stuff. And that plays a factor into how we look at things, how we deal with things, how we process things. So, Air Force, this first one's going to be a little bit different. Do we experience death and loss? Yes, it's going to be more so of our pilots that are going to do that. Army Marines, they're going to see it more firsthand. Unprecedented fatigue. We're comfortable being back here working our 8-hour days, but being in the military, you're working 10 plus hour days, typically 7 days a week with no end in sight, if you will, as far as having a day off. My initial orders to Desert Shield, it said unknown as far as a return date. So we could have been there 30 days, we could have been there a year and a half. And again, like I said, we lived in tents. Um, and so that uncertainty plays a factor, as I said, into things that we experience. But what we quickly try to do was establish the same routine that we had back in the States as where we were in the United Arab Emirates. So again, the things that we're experiencing when we're in a deployed location is now coming to an end, and we have to come back to our home base and become acclimated again. The readjustment is not an easy thing because if we're in a relationship, we're not only readjusting back to our work environment, but we're reacclimating to our home environment. And I want to bring something because this is very important. Right after I retired, officially in 2013, it's probably about a year later, Fort Campbell, Kentucky experienced a significant number of suicides on that base. And the upper level Army leadership said, hey, we need to take a step back and figure out what's going on. And I looked at my wife and I said, it's not hard to figure out. Fort Campbell is a highly deployed base, constantly on rotation, one unit and another unit, then another unit. So think about this. Jessica, just out of curiosity, how many people are on the webinar?
We have currently 45.
Okay. So all 45 of us work in the same unit. Half of us deploy. So we'll say 22. That leaves the 23 back at the home station, not only doing your job, but maybe one or two other individuals who have left. So instead of working, say, a 7 to 4 or an 8 to 5, now it's a 7 to 6, 7 to 7, 7 to 8. Because the mission at home doesn't stop because people have gone. And so the overwork, the no vacation, working weekends had a very heavy toll on many of the folks at Fort Campbell. And we had the very unfortunate result of many of them saying, I can't do this anymore. And we're going to get to that aspect of it as well. I'm not going to read everything on the slide, just talk about just a few of these things because you can see where I'm going with this. Unrealistic adjustment expectations. I thought when I came back 7 months later from Desert Shield, Desert Storm, that I could just jump right back into the role that I left. And my wife says, no, you're not. I've been mom, I've been dad. You're going to have to ease back into this. I had to ease back into being a husband. I had to ease back into being a father. And for some, that acclimation period can take longer than others. And that's perfectly okay. There is no set time frame for how somebody readjusts from coming back. So just keep that in mind. Some of the things that we experience, we may not be able to share with others that have not walked in our shoes. And that's very important as we get into address the issues of the PTSD and the TBI and suicide. So we're downrange. We're in that deployed location. We're trying to figure out what's going on, how long, and all that other stuff. What can happen is these things. And again, this is not the complete list. This is just an idea of what many of our veterans go through. And I went through some of these as well, particularly hypervigilance. When you're in a war zone, you have to be aware of your surroundings at all time. And enough said. So how was I hypervigilant? Going into a restaurant, I was immediately looking to where all of the exit or the points of entry and exits are, and I would sit with my back to where I have visual sights of those entrances and exits. After a while, my wife would look at me like, "What's going on?" And I told her, and I said, "I know it's rude, and I'm trying not to be rude, but it's this is just something that I'm working with and I'm dealing with." And then several years later, we were at another restaurant, and she asked, "Do you want to sit here? Or do you want to sit on this side of the table? Or you want to sit on this side?" And I said, "You sit here, I'll sit with my back," because I said, I can't be this way all the time. And so, me being able to share with her what was going on helps the relationship. But not all veterans are like that. So I want you to understand that, again, veterans are often hesitant to discuss what's happened to them in a combat environment with folks that haven't walked in those shoes. And again, this list is not complete. It's just to give you an idea. So again, having that mentality, what does it do from there? It can lead the mental aspect of it that eventually brings an individual to more of a healthcare issue because of something that is going on up here. And so the first thing that I would like to do is talk about the post-traumatic stress disorder. Also need to know information in general in the military. Hannah, if you don't mind, since I just peeked at that, would you drop something real quick as to what you mean about that? Thank you. So from Medscape, and I like to use very credible sources, it is a result from an exposure to something. All of us can have PTSD. So PTSD is just not exclusive to military or police or first responders. All of us can have PTSD. And I will share a quick story. In 2018, our oldest son had a medical incident and his aorta ruptured. He had a complete aortic dissection and didn't know whether he was going to live or die. And so my wife and I flew out to California right before he had his first surgery. Luckily, he's still with us. So I thank God every day for that. But I was flying back and forth from Ohio to California because I was still working as the director at that time for the first 4 months. Well, in March of that year, I had a biopsy and wound up with sepsis. So I was in the hospital for 2 days. He's in California, I'm in Ohio. And at the same time, my father, who was 88 at the time, was in the hospital because of his heart. So because I could not be in 3 places at once, concerned about all of this going on, and then finally losing my father in July of that year, I developed a little bit of PTSD. And I was very fortunate that I had befriended somebody in our counseling and psychological services that I could talk to about this. And we'll get to those resources later on. But it's an exposure to something that threatens us. And it's here, and we have to figure out what it is, what's going on within us, and then how to deal with it. So these are the symptoms, signs and symptoms from the Mayo Clinic, and it's generally into 4 different categories. And that's very important to realize. And I don't know what their testing criteria is in order to determine this, but it's very good. The one dealing with negative changes in thinking and mood is very important because, like I said, post-traumatic stress is a mental thing that we're trying to figure out. And the negative feelings, the feelings of hopelessness, lack of interest, all play a factor that can lead our veterans into committing suicide. And so this is a hard topic to talk about, but it is a necessary one that we have to be open and honest with each of us to look at this and say, okay, yes, it's a bad thing, but how do we turn this bad thing into a positive for our veteran? And then we're going to get to that as well. Let me see if Hannah, from my
Yeah, I was just
experience, the
going to let
military,
you know there's a response there.
yep. From my experience, the military operates on a need to know information basis, which makes it harder for vets to open up. Hannah, that is true to a lot of degree. It depends on the rank of the individual, what the individual's job is, and what their operation is going on at that moment in time. So yes, it can very much be that you have to be in the know in order to get that, and it does make it harder for the vets. It is also a trust issue, and we're going to get to that as well. Veterans are, I don't want to use the word condition, but that's the only one that comes to my mind, meaning that, especially for men, we are taught to suck it up. You got to be strong. You got to push forward. And that's not always a good thing. Oh, um, so thank you for elaborating on that, Hannah. I do appreciate it. So these are the signs and the symptoms. So another mental um, shift that we all could probably go through is that when we see this is a young lady standing against a pillar, it's not about what's wrong with the individual, it's what happened to the individual. And sometimes we do, and I'm guilty of this, what's wrong with you? And don't mean it from a bad thing, but it's more a word choice. And we know that words have power and meaning. So I also have to remind myself to say, what happened? What can I do to help? And that's very, very important. Yes, to the conditioned reference. Yeah. So thank you, Hannah. All right. So we've talked about PTSD. And the other thing that we need to do is look at how that's assessed. And this just comes from the DSM. I'm not going to cover any of this, but I want you to be aware that there is criteria that is used in order to effectively diagnose an individual and um, ascertain whether they have PTSD or not. And again, these slides are going to be made available to everybody. So I just want you to realize that this is what our clinicians use in order to make that assessment. Now, what I did, it was really interesting. Some of these songs just came into my repertoire recently, and I wanted to include this. So if you want to go onto YouTube and listen, that's fine. But I did put some caveats there. Falling in Reverse has very explicit language, and this particular video has some graphic cinematography, like it says, and the same thing with this last one. It has explicit language. But what I want to do is I want to read the first verse of Falling in Reverse, Voices in My Head. And I want you to picture if you may have experienced this, or if you know of a veteran or somebody else that may have experienced this. So here we go. The voices in my head keep on telling me to pray, because I'm spinning like a carousel circling the drain. Hit the bottom of the bottle. I don't want to feel the pain, but that is all I got for now. I don't want to talk about it. The voices in my head keep on begging me to stay. If I pull the trigger now, then the demons go away. And I know my time is coming, so there ain't no time to waste. So that is all I got for now. I don't want to talk about it. For many veterans, that is so true. They don't want to relive those intrusive thoughts like what I showed on a couple previous slides on the signs and symptoms of PTSD. It's painful. It's a reminder of what they experience. And it could also be that many of these veterans are experiencing survivor's guilt. Why did all of my team, my buddies, my comrades perish and I didn't? I should be the one that should have died instead of them. And then they don't want to talk, and it's hard for the veterans after that to open up. So I encourage you to listen to the songs if you don't want to watch the videos. That's why I included the title and some of the artists that may have assisted them with it. So another thing that can contribute to suicide is the traumatic brain injury. And I love the definition from Medscape because it says it is an insult to the brain. And I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence here, um, but it's a pretty powerful definition for me because there's a separation between the brain and the skull, and so the brain is able to move around a little bit. When something is constantly hit, it's going to move, and on the interior, it's going to become bruised and damaged, and that's that insult that occurs. And like it says, it can cause permanent or total impairment, or excuse me, temporary impairment of cognitive functioning. Um, and again, that's very, very important because especially our Army and Marine folks, they're going to experience more traumatic brain injury than some of the other branches. So, what are those symptoms? Again, I'm not going to read all of this, um, but it's a list that our clinicians will use to figure out whether somebody has TBI or not. Um, and some of these things you may experience on your own because of other health issues. Like for me, I have headaches. I'm diagnosed with migraines. I have ringing in my ears, which is from tinnitus, being around a lot of loud equipment and aircraft during my years of service. I have now developed bad sleep patterns after coming back from Kuwait. So I have a CPAP machine because I've been diagnosed with sleep apnea. So that doesn't say that I have TBI. It's just other medical conditions that are very similar to TBI. So it's important for our clinicians to get it right in the diagnosis. And I know that they have other assessments that they will use in order to make that correct assessment. Excuse me. So, what treatment is out there that can help our individuals that deal with PTSD and TBI? The worst one is the self medication. And for many veterans, it's alcohol. Oh, what happened? Oh, it's alcohol. And that is not a good thing because that leads down to a whole host of other problems, whether it's in the workplace and or in their personal life. Um, and it used to be it was just a clinical setting, but many people have figured out working with other veterans, how can we help you deal with this besides medicine? And it's using the visual imagery or getting them involved in, as it says, equine or art or music or photography or uh, yoga, whatever the case may be. And each veteran's type of treatment, while similar, can be very, very different based on the individual. For me, dealing with my PTSD was talking to my friend and also praying. I'm not proselytizing, but my faith is very important to me, and so by telling God my issues and asking for help, it was very, very therapeutic for me. What's this one? Any research on the impact of therapy dogs in veteran communities? There are more and more service agencies that are using the therapy dogs. And from everything that I've seen, Ashley, it has made a very positive impact on soothing the veteran. Let's just say, for example, that loud noises will trigger a veteran, and for many, that's exactly what it is. Um, or they have some kind of other health issue. Many of these service animals are trained in that specific thing that they will be able to sense the body change in that veteran and help that veteran to get out of that situation to calm themselves down so they don't have an episode. That is a great question, Ashley. So thank you for asking that. And I hope I gave you a good explanation. But yes, there's a lot of good with the therapy dogs for our veterans. Oh, we have another one. Do we? Thanks for your. Oh, you're most welcome. So again, Um, some PTSD and TBI is going to be so bad that veterans are going to have to use the last three in order to work through and manage. Never going to get away from it. They manage it, and that's the key to this. Got to click on the slides again. So, what do we deal with? I definitely deal with medical issues. Uh, I did have, like I said, some PTSD, so the psychological, and then these other things. And the last one is what we're going to be getting to in those suicidal thoughts. So here's some statistics from the latest uh, National Veterans Suicide Prevention Annual Report. And I'm not going to read all of these, but they're not good statistics, especially that we had over 6,000 veterans commit suicide in 2020. Even though it's a decrease since 2016, it's not good. Um, there's a charge in trying to help our veterans better with understanding what's going on up here within them so they don't choose this course of action, and which is a good thing. And it is good that we're having this conversation because I'm going to give you some suggestions on what you can do to help lower this number. But this last one is also very, very troubling. Veteran women are 5 to 6 times more likely to commit suicide as compared to women who have not served. And I put sexual trauma up there just as a placeholder to help you uh, to understand that not only is what they've seen, but what they've also experienced. And unfortunately, in the military, there's still a lot of sexual trauma that our women experience. And not all VA health communities are bad at this, but there's many that don't take the experience of the woman into consideration. They use other excuses for why this lady experienced what they did, and so they don't get the treatment that they truly need. So what is the VA doing about this? Community partnership, uh, asking questions of veterans who are using veteran services about what's going on in the life. Is there any indicators going on at this moment in time that would elude a clinician to to think that this veteran may be a potential suicide individual? Um, Promoting the connectedness, increasing lethal safety. And I put on there Chris Kyle. If you do not know who Chris Kyle is, he was an Army sniper, uh, and an inordinate number of kills while he was serving in our Army during in Iraq and Afghanistan. He got out of the military. He and his wife opened up an outdoor shooting facility to help veterans, and he was a big advocate in helping veterans. And I can't remember if he knew this individual or not, but anyway, they were at their outdoor range, and the individual turned his gun on Chris Kyle and killed him. So don't know what triggering mechanism. I don't remember any of that, but again, we can go through all the lethal means safety, and we can still have an unfortunate incident like this. But it's important that we have that safety training um, to help our individuals. And then there's even talk about passing laws that if a veteran is diagnosed with PTSD or TBI, then they shouldn't be allowed to own weapons, or they have to have the weapons taken out of the house. Again, I'm just presenting facts. I'm not presenting anything of whether one agrees with it or not. It's just that's what the talk is on the table. So, what is it that you can do? What is it that we can do to help our veterans, and especially our student veterans who are on campuses? And that's working with them. bringing awareness programs to the campus and local community. And I put on there that we at Ohio University established a program 3 years ago. It's called Stop 17. Again, if you remember that stat from the VA, it said 16.8. So we just say 17. And so last year was really huge. We had 1,000 t-shirts that had Stop 17 on it. And the students had to do 17 of an exercise. So like 17 push-ups or 17 sit-ups or whatever to get a free t-shirt. We gave out over 800 on the first day. And so we're doing it on this Friday and we have 1,100 t-shirts. It's a great way to get the campus involved in recognizing and being aware of what our veterans are going through. And it could be one of their classmates that wind up becoming one of these statistics. So we want to make sure that we bring that awareness. We brought the wall at heels. It was back in 2017. Traveling Vietnam Wall Memorial to the campus. And, we're talking about healing. We had a Vietnam vet tell us that seeing that wall, seeing the names of people that he served with on that wall was the beginning of a healing process for him. 50 years later, there's no time frame on trying to help someone that has had a mental health issue for so long. So just hearing that, it made all the difference in the world, and it made it, from my viewpoint, a successful event. Working with campus communities, we do Athens area stand down, where we bring veterans, homeless veterans, there to our fairgrounds. The VA's there and give free health checks. We give food, we give clothing to help out our veterans in other kind of assistance. We have the training program, which I mentioned at the very beginning. We're called Landing Zone. It's a 4-session program that we develop, and it's about our student veterans. And then other education. On the slide, I'm an adjunct professor. I was fortunate to work with the university to create a graduate certificate program dealing in veterans health, and I do teach one of those courses. And then here's some other resources. Here's another chat, another consideration, which with means restricted unit distribute gun. We've done that, gun locks. They face liability for allotment instead outside groups tabling on campus. Oh, that's interesting. I haven't thought about it from that perspective. But we did give out some gun locks. Oh, wow. I should have read further, Ashley. My apology. For our military, balancing and raising awareness without further without the further stigma that all veterans are damaged or crazy. Thank you for mentioning that. As a common misperception. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. We do have an SBA chapter. They work closely with our veterans office to put on programming. So thank you for mentioning those comments. They are absolutely on point. So thank you very much for that. But here's some other resources. Vet Success on Campus. We've been on the waiting list for 5 years. It's a backlog with the VA to provide this. This is a person employed by the VA that knows everything about the VA to assist a student veteran. And then, of course, this other one called Vital, dealing with healthcare and the overall mental health of our veterans. Crisis line, very, very important. If you come across a veteran that is just beside him or herself, if you don't remember anything, remember 988. That's the new line for the Veterans Crisis Line. We did have an unfortunate incident with a veteran calling the Veterans Crisis Line not too long ago. Unfortunately, I forgot to look up the details. I think the operator hung up on the individual, and the individual a little bit later on committed suicide. So again, just to let you know, it's there to help and we want to help. And as it says, it's there 365 days of the year. This is a great website because these are veteran stories that are posted out there that another veteran can go to, or a family member can go to, and look them up and see what's going on, that a veteran has shared a story about what's going on with him or her, in the hopes of helping another veteran deal with what he or she is going through. At Ohio University, these are some of the things that we have that is great in our counseling and psych services. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but these are some of the programs that that office does provide to the whole community. And then these are additional resources that are on our campus and in our local community that that we have bridged that relationship. And it's great because our university was founded, one of the founders was a military individual, and so we are military centric, if you will. um, the campus is concerned and proud of our military heritage. And so these agencies, we have, between myself as the previous director and the current director, we've worked tirelessly to build strong relationships with all of our campus partners, and then even some that are community based, to do the best that we can for our veteran in that particular circumstance. Here are my references because I want you to realize that I did my homework. I just didn't want to espouse these individuals and say, "Hey, look what I found." But I did want to make sure that I included the references so you know where I got my information from. So it was a lot to take in. It was a lot to share. Um, it is something that I do talk about in my class, especially from the PTSD, because in my class, from the day one, a student has to find a veteran and work with that veteran through the 7 weeks, and they're asked a series of questions every week because I want the students to understand the life of a veteran, especially from a healthcare perspective. And mine is not very, very detailed like some of the other healthcare classes. I want to say that. But they have to understand the veteran from the perspective of receiving healthcare and what healthcare is doing for them and what they're not doing for them, so that a better relationship can be built. And so it's important that they find a veteran, and we had one in our last class that just really opened up to my student, and it was a very wonderful learning experience because the student, of course, had to share with the class what the veteran was saying on these different topics. So with that, I will close uh, my presentation, and I am ready for questions that you may have.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Mr. Edwards, for not only just providing
Thank
that
you.
just very detailed, very resourceful, um, insightful presentation on military culture, understanding PTSD and suicide. Certainly that military students, veterans may experience, but also including in your personal, experiences. It certainly, helped to enrich the conversation.
Thank you.
And, we hope to engage the audience right now. So if you have questions
Absolutely.
for Mr. Edwards on anything that he's covered in his slides, you can feel free to post in the chat. Now, it looks like we do already have someone that's posted. It says, I am currently working with a
Mhm.
student returning to campus this semester from deployment, having some difficulty readjusting to socializing with peers, easily frustrated with others. He sees as self-centered, and since he is trained and has to operate from a team-centered. Any perspective or thoughts on assisting with this student? And thank you for your comment, Mary.
Yes,
Question.
absolutely. Oh my gosh, Mary, we've had a few of these come into our office as well. Best thing I can do is tell you that if you have built a relationship with this student, continue to have that relationship and try to get this individual to open up to you. Remember a few slides back, well, it was quite a few slides back, we have a wartime mentality in a non-war zone environment. And if you can help that student understand, it's going to be difficult at first to switch the brain to go from downrange to sitting in a classroom and viewing the students from, oh my God, you have not lived life. You have no clue what you're talking about. You sit here in your pampered little environment. It's that mentality. And so if you can't work with a student in helping that student acclimate better mentally and thinking, then if you have a counseling and psych services on campus, I would recommend calling or walking the student over if the student is interested. Okay, that's the key. If the student is interested, or if you have a local VA clinic that has a psychologist or psychiatrist that works in that clinic, excuse me, reaching out to that clinic and see if you can get an appointment with that student. There's just some things that we are not going to be able to help with, and we understand our limitations. But the fact of the matter is, you're working with this student and you want to help this student and you've built a relationship with that student, you're going to be successful. And I hope that answers your thoughts or your question.
Yeah, and it looks as though we have some other kind of thanks for the conversation, but I actually have a question myself. You mentioned regarding the wall that heals, that it's a traveling wall.
Yes.
And it sounds as though it's something that certainly can bring healing, conversation, and much more. If
Yes.
someone was interested in bringing
Mhm.
that particular wall to their campus community, how would they do that? Would they contact you, or who would be the point of contact?
Um, if I'd have been smart enough, Jessica, to realize I was going to mention that before the conversation, I would have looked it up and had it for you. But all we did is we Googled the wall that heals, and there's a couple of them. So let me jot that down and go back and look at which one we brought. Okay. And then what I can do is either provide it to you or Chris so you can then share with the participants. Does that sound good?
That's wonderful.
Awesome.
That's great. That's great. And it's good to know too that there's more than one. And so, if
Yes.
someone is listening from out of state, they may even have interest in that. There's
Yep.
actually a couple more questions and comments that have come in. So we want to try
Mhm.
to get to as many as we possibly can. So the next one is from it's like Serena Castaneda. Any tips to handle a student that has become elevated or aggravated?
Serena, are you talking about in the classroom or just in general? What did she say? Oh,
Okay. So I guess,
ooh, over the phone or in person? Okay.
okay, yeah.
Ooh, okay. Serena, that is going to be one that uh, I'm not trying to be diplomatic. I'm trying to put the right words together for you. Okay. So just bear with me just a moment. When a student becomes elevated or aggravated, I would tell the student, okay, we need to take a moment because something either I said or something I didn't say has triggered you. So let's just take a step back. Let's take a moment. Let's take some breaths and let's come back to this. If they if you feel they are becoming a threat to you, you call campus security. Don't play around. If it's a veteran student, again, we don't know what a triggering mechanism could be for this student. You do not want to put your life in danger, but you also want to be able to try to calm them down so you can have a conversation. You're going to be your own best, what's the word I'm looking for? Jessica, help me out. Not advocate. You have that
Judgment?
sense whether something is about to go real sideways. So if you feel that, if you don't have this in your office, get a panic button. We have those in the Veteran Center, um, and they will come running. Okay, and then the campus police can handle that. I hope that helps, but that's one that can have so many different scenarios to cause the elevation or aggravation. Um, I would try to talk to them, and if that doesn't work, say, okay, I'm going to have to ask you to leave and come back. And if you refuse to do that, we'll have campus security come. You can give them a choice. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. And we do have a few more, and I'll probably read this
Okay.
last comment here, and I apologize that we won't have time to get through the rest of them, but there's a comment from Zachary Conrad. The states, as a veteran myself who currently provides services to veterans experiencing homelessness, I just want to thank you for the information regarding PTSD, acknowledging that sometimes it is hard to explain to a non-veteran staff member what is going on with the veteran. It was also nice to hear that some of the habits I still have, hypervigilance and making sure I can see all entrances and exits in a
Mm-hmm.
public setting, are more common than I thought. And I
Mm-hmm.
also echo that your comment, Zachary. We all do appreciate the information again that was shared today from Mr. David Edwards. And so again, we thank you so much for your time today, everyone, for participating in today's webinar. One last time, if you are looking to obtain CEU and CME credits, the code today is 35, or excuse me, 65 CAPE. That's 65 CAPE. And we hope to see you on December 5th for our final webinar for this year. Thank you again, everyone. We thank you for serving if you're a member of one of our military branches in the United States, and have a wonderful afternoon. Take care.